The Imperial Exhibition Hall had been built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling curved 300 meters overhead, a transparent dome through which the pale rings of Queen Elyra drifted across the violet sky. Holographic banners floated between marble black pillars, each displaying the emblem of a weapons guild, a planetary army, or a corporation wealthy enough to purchase a moon and complain about the view. Queen Elyra entered beneath a fanfare generated by 12 brass-colored drones. She looked almost human at first glance, tall, poised, with silver blonde hair falling over one shoulder and clear sapphire eyes that missed very little. Only her long, elegant ears revealed her alien heritage, rising through her hair like delicate blades. Behind her came generals, ministers, scientists, and Lord Valor, the royal advisor whose uniform contained so many medals that he leaned slightly to the left. "Your Majesty," Valor said, struggling to keep pace, "today you will witness the future of Imperial warfare." Last year, the future caught fire. A minor cooling failure. The inventor landed in a fountain. A fortunate placement of architecture. Elyra hid a smile as they approached the first demonstration platform. A broad-shouldered engineer proudly presented a red combat suit covered in rotating cannons. He announced that it could target 40 enemies at once. The armor awakened with a thunderous hum, scanned the hall, and aimed all 40 weapons at the refreshment tables. The audience froze. A technician slapped the emergency switch. The suit fired 40 harmless targeting beams into a tower of ceremonial pastries. One cake surrendered immediately. Elyra continued walking. The next invention was a stealth field designed to make an entire soldier invisible. It worked perfectly, except for the wearer's boots, helmet, and nervous expression. By the fifth demonstration, the Queen's patience had become thinner than the transparent data screens floating beside the platforms. Every inventor promised invincibility. Every general applauded. Every machine seemed designed primarily to generate noise, smoke, and expensive repair bills. Then she noticed the quiet corner. There were no banners there, no cheering officers, no assistants in polished uniforms, only a plain gray suit of armor standing on a low platform beside a human man with untidy dark hair and a battered toolbox. The armor looked unfinished. Its surface lacked imperial gold, weapon mounts, ceremonial crests, or even a manufacturer's emblem. Thin geometric lines crossed its chest and limbs, faintly glowing beneath layers of matte metal. Elyra slowed. "Whose display is that?" Valor consulted his wrist projector. "Adrian Vale, independent human engineer, assigned to Auxiliary Section 47. Why is no one watching?" "His armor has no weapons." Elyra looked at him. "That is unusual at a weapons exhibition. Possibly a misunderstanding." Before she could respond, a sharp explosion echoed through the hall. On a nearby testing field, a military contractor had activated a portable plasma lance. The beam struck a reinforced target shield, pierced it, continued through 2 safety barriers, and slammed directly into the gray armor. People screamed and scattered. Adrian did not move. The plasma beam burned bright enough to bleach the color from the room. The platform beneath the armor cracked. Warning sirens erupted. Security drones dropped from the ceiling like metallic insects. Then the lance shut down. Smoke rolled across the floor. The gray armor remained standing. Its surface was untouched. The only visible change was a soft ripple of blue-white light passing across its chest before fading into darkness. Silence spread through the hall. The contractor stared at the destroyed barriers. "That weapon can melt starship hull plating." Adrian glanced at the armor, then at the smoking hole behind it. "You may want to adjust the left alignment," he said. "It pulls slightly." Queen Elyra walked toward the platform. Her guards moved ahead of her, but she raised one hand and they stopped. Up close, she saw that the armor's surface was not metal in any conventional sense. Tiny plates shifted beneath one another like scales, continually changing their orientation. A low vibration traveled through the air around it, almost too deep to hear. "What material is this?" she asked. Adrian closed his toolbox. "Several materials." That answer would not satisfy a schoolchild. It did not satisfy the funding committee either. A few nearby officers laughed before remembering they were standing beside the Queen. Elyra touched the armor's forearm with 2 fingers. The surface warmed beneath her skin, recognizing the contact, then became still again. General Sarven stepped forward, his expression dark. "Your Majesty, this could be a staged reaction. The plasma lance may have been weakened." The contractor looked offended. "My lance destroyed 3 barriers." 2.5, Adrian corrected. Sarven pointed toward the central testing range. "Then let us use an Imperial disruptor cannon." Murmurs moved through the crowd. A disruptor cannon did not burn through armor. It broke molecular bonds. Anything struck by it ceased to be a meaningful object. Adrian looked at the cannon, then at the armor. "That seems excessive." Sarven smiled. "Concerned?" "Yes, that platform is rented." Elyra's long ears shifted slightly, betraying her amusement. The armor was moved to the reinforced range. Hundreds of spectators gathered behind gravitational shields. The disruptor cannon rose from the floor, its barrel surrounded by rings of violet energy. Adrian stood beside Elyra at the observation line. "You are confident?" she asked. "No." The Queen turned sharply. "I am an engineer," he continued. "Confidence is what people use when they have not completed enough testing." The cannon fired. A sphere of distorted space crossed the range without sound. It struck the armor, and the entire hall trembled. Light folded inward. Sensors screamed errors. For one terrible second, the gray suit vanished inside a black shimmer. Then the distortion collapsed. The armor still stood. Not damaged, not scorched, standing precisely where it had been, while the floor around it had become a smooth crater. Elyra stared at it, her composure finally breaking. She turned toward the stunned crowd, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "Who designed this perfect protective armor?" No one answered. Generals looked at scientists. Scientists looked at contractors. Contractors looked as though they wished to become invisible more successfully than the earlier demonstration. Adrian lifted one hand. "I did." The Queen looked at the quiet human with the worn toolbox. Far beyond the transparent dome, hidden among the stars, something ancient shifted in the darkness. The silence following Adrian's confession lasted only a few seconds, but in the Imperial Exhibition Hall, it felt long enough for several careers to collapse. Queen Elyra studied him as though the worn human engineer had suddenly become a new species. Around them, officers whispered into encrypted communicators, scientists enlarged scans of the armor, and nobles who had ignored Auxiliary Section 47 now crowded so close that Adrian's toolbox nearly disappeared beneath polished boots. General Sarven recovered first. "One successful test proves very little," he declared. Adrian glanced toward the crater where the disruptor blast had erased everything except his armor. It proved something to the floor. A nervous laugh moved through the audience. Sarven did not join it. "The suit will undergo Imperial examination. Careful examination, I hope. Our laboratories are the finest in the galaxy. That is what the brochure says." Queen Elyra raised one hand before Sarven could respond. Her long ears tilted slightly forward, a subtle sign of interest that Adrian had already learned to recognize. "Bring the armor to the royal proving grounds," she ordered. "Every test, every weapon, no staged demonstrations and no theatrical speeches." Several inventors quietly lowered their prepared speeches. Within 2 hours, the gray suit stood inside a circular chamber beneath the palace, surrounded by armored observation galleries and layers of gravitational containment. The chamber had been designed to test starship weapons. Adrian considered mentioning that this seemed unreasonable for something meant to be worn by a person, but Sarven appeared too pleased with himself to appreciate the observation. The first weapon was a thermal lance capable of cutting through a cruiser's engine core. It struck the armor in a stream of white fire. The suit absorbed the heat and released it harmlessly through luminous lines across its back. The second test used a kinetic accelerator. A tungsten projectile crossed the chamber at 20 times the speed of sound. The armor shifted one step backward. The projectile became vapor. The third test generated artificial gravity strong enough to crush a battle tank into a metal coin. The chamber groaned. Instruments shattered. One scientist's beverage rose from its cup, flattened into a perfect disc, and then dropped onto General Sarven's sleeve when the field ended. The armor remained upright. Sarven stared at the stain. Adrian offered him a cloth. The general refused it. By the sixth test, the watching scientists had stopped smiling. By the ninth, they had stopped speaking. When antimatter fragments detonated against the suit's chest and produced nothing more than a faint silver glow, even Queen Elyra leaned closer to the shield. "How?" she asked. Adrian stood beside a holographic control table covered in equations. "The outer layer does not resist force in the usual way. It redirects energy through a multidimensional lattice." One scientist frowned. "There are only 4 measurable dimensions. Then your measuring equipment is optimistic. You are claiming access to hidden spatial geometry? I am claiming the armor does not care what we call it." The Queen's mouth curved faintly. Sarven paced behind them. "No defense is perfect. Increase the output." The chief technician hesitated. "General, the next setting could rupture the containment rings." "Then reinforce them." "With what?" Sarven looked toward Adrian's armor. The technician looked at him too. For the first time that day, the general seemed to recognize the danger of his own logic. The final test was an experimental phase weapon, a device forbidden on inhabited worlds because it displaced matter for several seconds, before returning it unpredictably. A previous trial had caused a target drone to reappear inside a wall. The wall had not forgiven anyone. Adrian watched the weapon charge. Queen Elyra turned to him. "Will the armor survive?" "It should." That word is not reassuring. It is one of engineering's more honest words. The phase cannon fired. A dark wave passed through the chamber. The armor vanished. The monitoring displays filled with static. 1 second passed, then 2. At 5 seconds, the scientists exchanged worried glances. At 10, Sarven folded his arms triumphantly. At 11, the armor reappeared directly behind him, its internal systems activated with a soft hum. Sarven turned, saw the empty helmet facing him, and stepped backward so quickly that he collided with the observation rail. Adrian checked the scanner. "Interesting." The Queen approached the armor. "What happened?" "The phase field moved it through local space." "To where?" Adrian studied the data. "Approximately 4 meters behind the general." "I noticed that part." The chamber relaxed into uneasy laughter. Even Elyra smiled openly now, though Sarven looked as if he intended to declare war on geometry. Later, when the scientists attempted to remove a sample from the armor, their cutting instruments failed one after another. A molecular saw lost all its teeth. A plasma drill shut itself down. A robotic arm tried to bend one plate, received a feedback surge, and began repeatedly apologizing in 6 languages. Adrian disconnected it. "It is embarrassed," he explained. Queen Elyra remained beside him while the others worked. "Why build protection instead of weapons?" Adrian's expression changed. The humor faded, though not completely. "Because weapons improve faster than people do," he said. "Every civilization invents a new way to kill, then acts surprised when someone uses it." "You served in a war." It was not a question. Adrian looked toward the empty armor. "I repaired evacuation transports. Sometimes they arrived before the shooting. Sometimes they did not." Elyra heard what he left unsaid. Before she could answer, a warning tone sounded from the chamber doors. A royal messenger entered carrying a sealed data prism. His face had lost all color. "Your Majesty, we have lost contact with the Nerith frontier." Sarven straightened. "Communications failure." The messenger shook his head. "The entire defense network vanished. 12 stations, 4 cruisers, and 3 inhabited moons. No wreckage, no distress signal." The prism projected a final sensor image above the table. Against a field of distant stars hung a shape too large to be a ship and too precise to be natural. It resembled a black fracture in space, surrounded by rings of pale energy. Adrian stared at the pattern. The same geometry glowed faintly across the chest of his armor. The black geometry hovering above the data prism rotated without sound, swallowing the light of the chamber as though the image itself disliked being observed. Adrian stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the pale rings surrounding the impossible vessel. They pulsed in the same sequence as the lines across his armor. 3 short flashes, 1 long, then silence. Queen Elyra noticed the change in his face before anyone else did. "You recognize it?" Adrian did not answer immediately. He enlarged the projection until the vessel's fractured surface filled the air between them. "Not the ship," he said at last. "The field around it." General Sarven folded his arms. "You expect us to believe your workshop accidentally reproduced the technology of an enemy no living civilization has encountered? I also accidentally built a coffee heater that opened a 6-second gravity well," Adrian replied. "Accidents are often very ambitious." No one laughed this time, although Elyra's long ears twitched with restrained amusement. The chamber sealed under emergency protocol, and a circular command table rose from the floor. Holographic star maps unfolded above it, displaying the Nerith frontier as a cluster of red systems. Every defensive beacon had gone dark at precisely the same instant. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply absent. Admiral Terev, a gray-haired alien whose uniform collar seemed determined to strangle him, pointed toward the vanished moons. "No known weapon removes matter without residue." Adrian examined the sensor logs. "Then stop calling it a weapon." The Admiral frowned. "What would you call it?" "A door." The room became still. Adrian separated the final transmission into layers. Beneath the visual distortion was a mathematical rhythm, too orderly to be interference. He converted it into spatial coordinates, then into harmonic frequencies. The result formed a lattice identical to the equations he had used while designing the armor's energy displacement system. "The stations were not destroyed," he said. "They were shifted out of local space." Sarven leaned over the table. "Shifted where?" "Somewhere our instruments cannot follow." "That is not an answer." "It is the answer we currently own." Elyra ordered the oldest Imperial archives opened. Within minutes, forgotten records streamed across the walls. Fragmented accounts from extinct civilizations, carvings recovered from dead planets, warnings encoded inside neutron stars. One symbol appeared repeatedly, a black fracture surrounded by 7 rings. The same symbol hovered above Nerith. An archivist swallowed hard. The text called them the Veiled Ones. They appeared 6,000 years ago. Entire species disappeared before the surviving worlds formed an alliance. "And how were they defeated?" Elyra asked. The archivist hesitated. "The records end before the final battle." Adrian looked at the armor. "Convenient." "For whom?" Elyra asked. "That is the unpleasant question." By morning, the palace had become the center of a silent panic. Military fleets were redirected. Civilian traffic was restricted. Official broadcasts described the frontier losses as a navigation emergency, which fooled almost no one because navigation emergencies rarely erased 3 moons. Adrian was transferred to a secure laboratory beneath the eastern tower, though the guards at the entrance repeatedly asked to inspect his toolbox. On the 3rd inspection, he handed it over with a sigh. "Careful. The blue spanner is temperamental." The guard looked alarmed. "Explosive?" "Metric." Inside, Imperial scientists surrounded the armor with scanners powerful enough to map individual atoms. They treated Adrian with the polite hostility reserved for people who had embarrassed them publicly. Dr. Selene Vark, chief of quantum defense, paced around him while holographic equations drifted behind her. "Your lattice contains functions unknown to Imperial mathematics." "They were unknown to me, too." "You wrote them. At 3 in the morning. That does not explain them. Very little done at 3 in the morning can be explained." Selene almost smiled, then remembered she was offended. Adrian showed them the origin of the equations, a recurring pattern found in background radiation, dismissed for centuries as cosmic noise. He had used it as a stabilizing model because it reduced energy loss. Now the same pattern appeared in the Veiled One's field. Elyra arrived without ceremony, carrying 2 cups of bitter palace tea. She handed one to Adrian. "You have not slept. I was waiting for the universe to become less alarming." "Has it?" "It has made no effort." She stood beside him, silver blonde hair falling across one long ear as she studied the equations. "Could your armor protect soldiers from being shifted?" "One soldier, perhaps. An army would require a network. Can you build one?" Adrian looked at her. Behind the Queen's calm expression, he saw exhaustion, fear, and the weight of billions of lives waiting for certainty she did not possess. "Yes," he said, though the word felt heavier than any metal. At that moment, every light in the laboratory dimmed. The scanners died. A low vibration passed through the floor, too deep to hear, but strong enough to tremble inside bone. The armor awakened by itself. Blue-white lines spread across its chest, forming 7 luminous rings. Then a voice emerged from the empty helmet, broken and ancient, speaking in a language no translator recognized. All except Adrian. He understood one sentence with impossible clarity. "The gate has opened again." The voice from the empty helmet faded, but the 7 luminous rings remained burning across the armor's chest. For several seconds, no one moved. Even the laboratory's service drones had stopped in place, their mechanical arms raised as though they too understood the warning. Queen Elyra was the first to speak. "What gate?" Adrian stared at the armor. "I was hoping it meant something harmless." Dr. Selene folded her arms. "Such as?" "A garden gate, a decorative gate, possibly a very old gate with poor hinges." The floor trembled again. Adrian sighed. "Not a garden gate." Emergency signals erupted across every wall. One by one, star systems along the frontier turned red. The Veiled Ones had appeared in 6 locations simultaneously, their black vessels emerging without hyperspace signatures, without gravitational displacement, and without any warning except a brief distortion in background radiation. The invasion began before the Empire had time to name it. Fleet recordings reached the laboratory in broken fragments. Imperial cruisers fired plasma salvos, antimatter torpedoes, and compressed singularity charges. The weapons crossed space, struck the dark vessels, and vanished as though swallowed by invisible mouths. Then the pale rings around the enemy ships brightened. Entire squadrons disappeared. No explosions, no wreckage, only empty space. Elyra watched the recordings without blinking, but Adrian saw her fingers tighten around the edge of the command table. "Order every fleet to withdraw from direct engagement," she said. Admiral Terev's hologram flickered above the table. "Your Majesty, retreat will expose 3 inhabited sectors. Remaining in formation will expose them without a fleet." The Admiral hesitated, then bowed. Adrian turned toward the gray armor. "We need to know whether the suit can resist the displacement field outside a laboratory." Sarven's image appeared beside the Admiral. "You want to send it into battle?" "I want to send the armor." "With whom inside it?" Adrian looked around the room. Every scientist suddenly found something fascinating on the floor. Selene cleared her throat. The suit was designed around human neural responses. Elyra looked at Adrian. "No. I have not proposed anything yet." "You were about to." "I was going to suggest a volunteer. You are the only person who understands it. That makes me a very qualified volunteer. That makes you irreplaceable." Adrian picked up his toolbox. "People keep saying that. It is becoming inconvenient." 2 hours later, the Royal Corvette Dawnfire departed for the Orison system, where a civilian evacuation convoy was trapped behind an advancing veiled vessel. Adrian stood in the launch bay wearing the armor for the first time. Its plates tightened around him like liquid metal, adjusting to his body with faint pulses of blue-white light. Elyra entered wearing a field uniform instead of ceremonial robes. Her silver blonde hair had been tied back, revealing the full length of her elegant ears. Adrian looked at the pulse rifle in her hand. "You are coming?" "It is my ship." That is not how command usually works. It is today. You have generals. I also have long ears. I hear them arguing from several decks away. Despite himself, Adrian laughed. The Dawnfire emerged from hyperspace into chaos. Dozens of civilian transports struggled toward the jump corridor while Imperial escorts fired desperately at a black vessel that filled half the stars. Its surface looked less like metal than a wound cut into space. Pale rings expanded around it, passing silently through ships. Every vessel touched by the field vanished. "Displacement wave approaching," the navigation officer shouted. Adrian stepped into the launch cradle. Elyra caught his armored wrist. "You return." That is the general purpose of protective armor. That was not a joke. It was a nervous professional statement. The outer doors opened. Adrian launched into space. Thrusters ignited across the armor's back, carrying him toward the advancing wave. The emptiness around him was filled with burning engines, broken transmissions, and the distant glow of a star partially hidden behind the veiled vessel. He raised both arms. The suit responded before he gave the command. Geometric lines spread over its surface. A translucent shield unfolded outward, first 10 meters wide, then 100, then several kilometers. The approaching displacement wave struck it. Pain exploded through Adrian's body. For one impossible instant, he saw beyond ordinary space. Countless ships suspended inside a dark dimension, moons frozen in pale currents, and shapes moving between them like predators beneath ice. Then the armor changed. Its lattice adapted to the enemy field, redirecting the wave around the evacuation convoy. The civilian ships remained in normal space. Across the Dawnfire's bridge, officers stared at their instruments. "He stopped it," Selene whispered. "No," Elyra said, watching Adrian's small figure burn like a blue star against the darkness. "He taught it where to go." The veiled vessel rotated toward him. A second wave began forming, larger than the first. Adrian's warning indicators filled his vision. Energy reserves dropped below 12%. Structural stress climbed beyond every tested limit. Then the armor spoke again inside his helmet. "Defense recognized." Thousands of new symbols appeared across his display. Far behind him, the Imperial factories received a transmission they had never been programmed to understand. Assembly lines activated by themselves. Gray armor plates began forming in numbers no human engineer had ordered. And in the darkness beyond Orison, the ancient enemy realized that something it had destroyed 6,000 years ago had begun to awaken. The second displacement wave struck Adrian's shield with enough force to bend the stars around him. For a moment, the Orison system vanished behind a wall of black light. His armor screamed through every nerve connection, translating impossible pressure into heat, pain, and warnings written in symbols he had never learned but somehow understood. The shield held. Barely. Cracks of blue-white energy spread across its surface while the civilian convoy crossed into the jump corridor. One transport after another disappeared into hyperspace, carrying thousands of families away from the veiled vessel. Adrian counted them through blurred vision. 41. 42. The final transport entered the corridor. "Everyone is clear," Elyra's voice said through his helmet. "Adrian, return immediately." That was already high on my list. He tried to activate his thrusters. Nothing happened. The armor's energy reserve displayed 3%, then reconsidered, and changed to 2. "That number feels judgmental," Adrian muttered. The veiled vessel opened along its center. Layers of darkness folded apart, revealing a pale core filled with rotating rings. A beam formed inside it, directed entirely at him. The Dawnfire moved between them. Elyra's corvette fired every weapon at once. Plasma bolts and antimatter missiles shattered against the enemy hull without effect, but the attack disrupted the beam for several seconds. Several seconds were enough. A tractor field wrapped around Adrian and dragged him toward the launch bay. He struck the deck hard, rolled twice, and came to rest beneath an emergency supply cart. The cart politely announced that he was obstructing access to medical blankets. Elyra reached him before the technicians did. "You nearly died." Adrian's helmet opened with a hiss. "The armor disagrees." The armor is smoking. It is expressing itself. She helped him sit upright. Behind her, the launch bay doors sealed as the Dawnfire entered hyperspace. The veiled vessel disappeared, but not before Adrian saw one final pulse cross its surface, a signal directed into deep space. They had saved Orison. They had also announced themselves. When the Dawnfire returned to Elyra, the Empire had changed. Military factories on 17 worlds were producing Adrian's armor without waiting for authorization. Assembly machines had rewritten their own programs, using data transmitted from the suit. Gray plates moved along automated lines in perfect silence, shaped by microscopic fields no Imperial engineer could explain. Selene stood inside the largest factory, watching robotic arms build a completed suit every 43 seconds. "This process violates 6 industrial laws," she said. Adrian leaned against his toolbox. His ribs still hurt when he breathed. "Only 6. 8 if the machines are legally conscious." A nearby assembly drone turned its camera toward her. Selene lowered her voice. "Possibly 9. The new armor was different from Adrian's prototype. Each suit contained an adaptive lattice that changed after receiving battle data. A weapon used against one soldier became less effective against every soldier connected to the network. The Empire had never possessed anything like it. Neither had Adrian. Queen Elyra ordered the 1st Armored Division formed under her direct command. Soldiers arrived from dozens of species, though the suits adjusted to each body automatically. Some had 4 arms, some had tails, and one amphibious officer required a helmet filled with water. The officer complained that the armor made him look like a ceremonial aquarium. Adrian told him it was a very intimidating aquarium. Training began immediately. The soldiers learned to create linked shields, redirect plasma fire, and survive gravity weapons that would once have crushed tanks. Each exercise strengthened the network. Each impact taught the armor. Elyra trained with them. Her suit formed around her in silver-gray layers, leaving her face visible beneath a narrow crown of protective material. Her long ears presented an engineering problem because the helmet repeatedly attempted to classify them as communication devices. "It has asked me to establish a secure channel," she said. Adrian adjusted the sensor settings. "Perhaps it respects their range. They are ears. Very advanced ears." She gave him a look that would have frightened most ministers. Adrian continued working. During the next week, veiled attacks spread across the frontier. This time, Imperial soldiers survived. Small units wearing the adaptive armor held evacuation routes against displacement fields and weapons that passed through conventional shields. Every battle sent new data back to Elyra. The armor learned faster than the enemy expected, but the enemy learned too. After the defense of Talrin Station, a damaged suit returned with something embedded in its chest, a sliver of black material that moved like liquid shadow. Selene isolated it inside a quantum chamber, but the fragment ignored gravity, heat, and containment fields. Then it began transmitting. The signal was not directed toward deep space. It was directed toward Adrian. When he entered the laboratory, the black sliver rose inside its chamber and reshaped itself into a thin, almost human figure. It possessed no face, yet Adrian felt it studying him. A voice emerged from every speaker in the room. "Builder." Elyra stepped in front of Adrian, pulse pistol raised. The figure tilted its head. "You restore the shell of our jailers." Adrian looked at the shifting shadow. "I restore what keeps people alive. Protection extends suffering." That sounds like something said by someone causing it. The figure remained still for a moment, as though humor required analysis. Then the chamber walls began to crack. "Your armor will be taken," the voice said. "Your mind will open the final gate." The fragment collapsed into darkness. A surge of energy tore through the laboratory, disabling every shield before the black sliver vanished. Silence returned. Selene checked the sensors with shaking hands. It transmitted our location. Elyra looked toward the stars beyond the laboratory window. "No," Adrian said, watching new symbols appear across his wrist display. It did more than that. A map unfolded above his armor. At its center burned an abandoned planet beyond Imperial space. The armor had identified the source of its ancient design, and the veiled ones were already moving toward it. The abandoned planet appeared on every chart under a different name, none of them comforting. The oldest Imperial records called it Vera Null, the Dead Star. Smugglers called it the place where compasses lied. Adrian called it inconveniently far away, which Queen Elyra considered the least dramatic description available. The Dawnfire crossed 3 unstable jump corridors to reach it, escorted by 6 cruisers and the 1st Division equipped with adaptive armor. From orbit, the planet looked like a sphere of black glass wrapped in silver storms. No oceans, no cities, no atmosphere suitable for life. Yet beneath its surface, the armor detected a structure larger than Kylora's capital. "How does an underground facility remain hidden for 6,000 years?" General Sarven asked. Adrian studied the shifting readings. "Good construction." "That is your professional assessment?" The less professional version contained several words not permitted on royal channels. Elyra's long ears tilted with amusement while Sarven pretended not to hear. They descended through violent electrical clouds in armored shuttles. Lightning struck the hull repeatedly, but the adaptive plating drank the energy and redistributed it through glowing lines beneath the floor. The landing site was a plain of smooth black stone. Nothing moved except dust rising against the wind, climbing upward in thin spirals before vanishing into the sky. Adrian, Elyra, Selene, Sarven, and 12 soldiers crossed the plain toward a triangular opening that appeared only when Adrian approached. The planet had recognized his armor. Inside, gravity changed direction twice before settling. Corridors unfolded from solid walls. Pale lights awakened ahead of them, revealing statues of tall, faceless beings wearing armor almost identical to Adrian's design. Their hands were empty. No swords, no rifles, only shields shaped like overlapping rings. "The jailers," Elyra whispered. "That is what the veiled fragment called them," Adrian said. Apparently they had strong opinions about interior decoration. The expedition descended for hours through chambers containing machines too large to understand. Some floated above bottomless shafts. Others projected maps of galaxies that no longer existed. At the center of the complex, they found an archive shaped like a hollow sphere. When Adrian stepped inside, thousands of symbols poured through the air and entered his armor. Images filled the chamber, worlds disappearing, fleets swallowed by dark fields, civilizations collapsing under weapons that adapted to every attack. Then came the faceless builders. They did not defeat the veiled ones with stronger guns. They surrounded entire star systems with linked defensive lattices, forcing the invaders into sealed regions of folded space. The prison had lasted 6,000 years, until now. Selene watched the translation form across her visor. The gates weakened because modern civilizations began using phase weapons. Sarven's face hardened. "We opened the prison ourselves." "Repeatedly," Adrian said, "with excellent funding." Another image appeared. The builders had designed the armor network as the first layer of a greater system. Millions of suits, ships, and planetary shields connected into one adaptive intelligence. Every attack made the whole network stronger. "Then we can rebuild it," Elyra said. Adrian studied the final equation. "Not completely. The core requires a living mind to guide the adaptation." "Yours," Selene said. Before Adrian could answer, the facility shook. Dust fell upward from the floor. A soldier looked at the ceiling. "I dislike this planet." "It may dislike us first," Adrian replied. Above the surface, black fractures opened in orbit. Veiled vessels emerged around the Imperial fleet, dozens at first, then hundreds. The cruisers formed a defensive ring while displacement waves rippled toward the planet. The archive activated automatically. A transparent model of the system appeared around Adrian. One path glowed from his armor into the planetary core. Another led outward to every suit in the Empire. Elyra stepped between him and the interface. "There must be another method." There usually is, Adrian said. It is usually discovered several years later by someone who criticizes the original solution. What will happen to you? Selene asked. Best estimate? My mind becomes part of the network long enough to wake the defense system. And the worst estimate? Sarven asked. Adrian looked at him. The same sentence, but without the words, long enough. The chamber trembled again. A section of wall vanished as a veiled strike passed through the facility. The soldiers raised linked shields, forming a bright dome over the group. Elyra caught Adrian's arm. You are not a component. No, he said softly. I am the engineer. Components are easier to replace. For once, she did not smile. Adrian placed both hands against the interface. The armor opened along his spine, connecting him to threads of blue-white light. Pain crossed his face, but he remained standing. Across the planet, buried towers awakened. Across the Empire, every adaptive suit stopped at once. Soldiers, pilots, and factory workers heard Adrian's voice inside their helmets. This is going to feel unusual, he said. Please avoid panicking until I finish explaining. The planetary core ignited. Rings of light expanded through the crust, through orbit, and across hyperspace. Millions of suits answered. The network became one vast shield stretching between worlds. The veiled vessels fired together. Darkness struck the lattice. It bent, cracked, and began to learn. Adrian saw every battlefield at once. He felt every frightened soldier behind every shield. He understood the enemy's weapons, their patterns, their hunger. And beneath it all, he sensed something worse. The Veiled Ones were not attacking to conquer the Empire. They were trying to stop him before the final defense awakened. Deep inside the network, an ancient message opened. Builder recognized. Last barrier ready. Adrian forced his eyes open and looked at Elyra through the storm of light. We can end this, he said, but the final battle will happen everywhere. The final battle began without a command. It began when every adaptive suit in the Empire heard Adrian breathe. Through the planetary core, he felt millions of frightened minds waiting behind shields of gray metal. Soldiers on burning moons, pilots trapped between veiled vessels, factory workers defending evacuation stations, and medics standing over civilians they refused to abandon. Their fear passed through him like cold water, but beneath it he sensed something stronger. They trusted the armor because they trusted the person who had built it. Adrian had once believed engineering was safer than leadership. Machines did not ask for hope. Equations did not look at him while worlds burned. Now, an entire galaxy was waiting for his answer. Link shields, he said through the network. Do not fire unless necessary. Let them teach us everything. General Sarven's voice reached him from the Imperial flagship. That may be the least inspiring battle speech in history. I left my inspiring notes in the other toolbox. Across thousands of systems, individual shields unfolded and connected. Blue-white lattices stretched between soldiers, ships, stations, and planets. They formed rings within rings, an immense defensive web woven through normal space and hyperspace alike. The Veiled Ones attacked. Their black vessels released displacement waves powerful enough to remove continents. The first impact bent the lattice inward. The second fractured entire sections. Adrian felt each break as pain behind his eyes, yet every damaged shield transmitted what it had learned to all the others. The third wave was weaker, not because the enemy had reduced its strength, but because the network had changed. Veiled weapons altered frequency. The armor adapted. They shifted dimensions. The lattice followed. They opened fractures inside Imperial formations, but soldiers joined shields around the wounds and forced them closed. For the first time in 6,000 years, the ancient enemy encountered a defense that improved faster than it could destroy. At Vera Null, Queen Elyra stood beside Adrian's rigid body while light poured through the seams of his armor. His breathing had become shallow. Selene studied the readings. The core is consuming his neural patterns. Disconnect him. If I do, the network collapses. Elyra drew her pulse pistol and aimed it at the interface. Selene stared at her. That will also collapse the network. I dislike machines that require unacceptable choices. Your Majesty, Adrian's voice whispered from the chamber. Please do not shoot the ancient planetary intelligence. Give me a better option. Inside the lattice, Adrian had discovered one. The veiled ones were not separate minds. Every vessel shared a single adaptive consciousness, endlessly changing in response to aggression. The more violently civilizations attacked, the more powerful it became. The ancient builders had imprisoned it because they could not destroy it without strengthening it. Adrian did not need to destroy it. He needed to give it nothing to fight. Cease fire, he ordered. Across the Empire, Imperial weapons fell silent. Sarven protested first. They are surrounding Queen Elyra. I know. They are charging another wave. I know. This plan appears to depend heavily on you knowing things. It is a recent professional development. The soldiers held their shields. The veiled ones fired. The final displacement wave struck every connected world at once. The lattice darkened. Cities shook. Oceans rose beneath artificial gravity. Stars flickered behind fields of folded space. Adrian felt the network begin to fail. Then millions of people strengthened it together. Soldiers locked arms. Pilots merged ship shields. Civilian generators fed energy into military relays. Even old exhibition prototypes were connected, including the invisible suit that still failed to conceal its boots. The lattice brightened. The enemy wave stopped. Unable to break the shield, the veiled consciousness changed its weapons again and again, each variation absorbed by a defense that refused to answer with violence. Its adaptations accelerated until they contradicted one another. Black vessels shuddered. Pale rings collapsed inward. Adrian opened the last barrier. Instead of imprisoning the veiled ones, the network created a stable corridor into empty intergalactic space, far from inhabited worlds. The ancient consciousness hesitated before the opening, unable to understand an enemy offering escape. Go, Adrian told it. There is nothing for you here. One by one, the black vessels withdrew. The fractures sealed behind them, and for the first time in recorded history, the stars remained where they belonged. The planetary core released Adrian. He collapsed into Elyra's arms. When he woke 3 days later, he was in the palace infirmary with Selene, Sarven, and the Queen standing over him. Did we win? He asked. Sarven nodded. Without firing the final shot, Adrian frowned. Generals must hate that. I am adapting. Months later, the military exhibition reopened. This time, the central hall contained no weapons competition. Engineers from 100 worlds presented rescue craft, planetary shields, medical drones, and armor designed to protect rather than kill. Queen Elyra stood before the gathered empire and asked the question that had begun everything. Who designed the armor that saved us? Adrian stepped forward, no longer hiding beside an unnoticed platform. I built the first suit, he said. Everyone else built the shield. The hall erupted in applause. Elyra awarded him the highest imperial honor and offered him a palace laboratory, unlimited funding, and any title he desired. Adrian considered carefully. I would like a workshop with a door that locks. Granted. And 1 week without anyone asking me to save the galaxy. A service drone immediately approached and announced a minor emergency involving a moon's unstable orbit. Adrian picked up his toolbox. Elyra laughed, her long ears lifting as she followed him from the hall. He had once built armor because he could not save everyone he had lost. Now he understood that protection was not the work of one brilliant engineer or one perfect machine. It was a promise shared by everyone willing to stand between danger and another life. Beyond the transparent dome, Queen Elyra's rings shone peacefully across the restored sky.